Your moderator today is Tom Schultz. He's the Project Director for Early Childhood Initiatives at the Council of Chief State School Officers in Washington, D.C., where he works with states to improve learning opportunities and outcomes for young children. Prior to joining the Council, Dr. Schultz worked at the Pew Charitable Trusts, where he co-authored a recently completed report, Taking Stock, Assessing and Improving Early Childhood Learning and Program Quality. Based on the work of the National Early Childhood Accountability Task Force, from 1995 to 2005, he served as a senior manager in the Head Start Bureau, where he led the development of initiatives in the areas of child assessment, program evaluation, professional development, and collaboration with other early care and education programs. Tom, thank you for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mariana. I'm excited to help facilitate the webinar this afternoon on the topic of ensuring school transitions, school readiness through successful transitions. My job is just going to be to introduce our four wonderful presenters and then get to as many of your questions as possible. And before introducing our first presenter, I just make 3 or 4 lightning fast points from my experience in working on these issues. One is to note the considerable history of organized efforts to improve the relationship between early childhood programs and schools, going back, in my memory, to the follow-through program that was instituted in the late 60s through the Office of Education, followed shortly by a demonstration program called Project Developmental Continuity that was sponsored by the Head Start Bureau. So we've been working on this issue for a good while. In my mind, there's a new urgency to these efforts to improve transitions for children because of our growing awareness of the early onset of achievement disparities between disadvantaged kids and their more advantaged peers. So it's not just a question of improving the relationship in general between collaborative entities, but we have a common challenge of trying to prevent and ameliorate the achievement gap. I think the good news is that we've got powerful new models and resources, starting with new partnerships at the federal level between folks at the top of the Department of Education and Health and Human Services. We also have innovative models, including the First School project that we'll hear about this afternoon, the PK3 initiative, and others. And finally, while I think this is an issue that's a challenging one, I'd also just offer the observation that for most young children, the day they get ready to go to kindergarten for the first time is a day of exciting achievement, that they are thrilled, that their parents are proud of, and they look forward to with great anticipation. So while I think we need to work as grown-ups to make this transition successful, I think we ought to realize that in the lives of kids, this is a really positive, exciting time. With that, I'm excited to introduce the first presenter who we're going to hear from this morning, who's Stephen Hicks, who's going to be standing in for Dr. Jacqueline Jones. As many of you know, Jacqueline is the Senior Advisor on Early Learning to the Secretary of Education, and Stephen works for her as a Special Assistant and comes to the federal government with tremendous experience as a former preschool and kindergarten teacher in the Los Angeles area. So we're going to hear some opening comments from Stephen, and we're glad he could step in and stand in for Jacqueline.
Thank you, Tom. I'm really delighted to be here, especially as a former preschool and kindergarten teacher. Transitions is really dear to my heart. I remember as a preschool teacher starting thinking about transitions for my young students from the very beginning of their experience in preschool, and coordinating activities with the kindergarten teacher. And then later as a kindergarten teacher, knowing how important it was that I reached out to those early childhood programs, the Head Starts, the private providers, the informal care providers, child care, and the state preschool programs that fed into our kindergarten program, so that there would be a real continuum of services and continuity of services for those young children and families as they entered our elementary school. It's really exciting to see such a stellar panel of presenters for this afternoon's webinar. I'm sure that all of you on the line and watching this will really learn a lot and get a lot of great expertise while you're listening. At the Department of Education, Secretary Duncan has really committed himself to a P through 12 education reform agenda. And our early learning agenda here is focused on improving the health, social, emotional, and cognitive outcomes for all children from birth through third grade, especially those with high needs. And here at ED, this is really the first time that we've had this dedicated position in Jacqueline Jones as Senior Advisor to the Secretary on Early Learning, as Tom was mentioning. It's really the first time we've had someone devoted to focus primarily on early learning, and of course, all of those transitions that you see from infant and toddler programs to preschool programs to the K through 3 programs. Over the last year, we've been working very closely with our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services around 6 interagency study groups, focusing on key components on early learning. And one of those teams met throughout the year to help define the elements of parent, family, and community engagement. Last spring, the Department of Education and Health and Human Services together conducted a listening and learning tour about early learning, and one of those key foci was family engagement sessions, and that was in Orlando, Florida. We've also formed with the Department of Health and Human Services, along with the Office of Budget Management and Budget and the DPC over at the White House, the Domestic Policy Council, an interagency policy board that is composed of senior staff from each of those agencies, and they're working on joint statements. And one of those joint statements is around family engagement, and that statement is going to include things like fostering partnerships between parents, early learning and development programs, and the elementary and secondary schools, and the districts in order to assist children and families as they make that transition from the birth to 5 programs or the preschool programs to various learning environments, from early care to preschool, from preschool to kindergarten, from kindergarten to the elementary grades, and then even all the way through the elementary grades as they go from kindergarten to first and second and third grade. We're also looking at making sure that in our statement we talk about the importance of engaging families in accessing and using information about the quality of the child's early learning program, as well as providing opportunities to have conversations with teachers using really critical data sources and other information about their child's progress and areas that they may need to work on or strengthen at home and be a partner with to better prepare their child for school success. In the reauthorization proposal that we're making for the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, we're looking to strengthen the local education agency or the schools, elementary schools' plans, that they would include promoting a continuity of services and effective transitions for all children as they go from an early childhood birth to 5 program or preschool program into the elementary school. And then also making sure that those school plans include activities to increase the coordination between the schools and the early learning program. I know that this purposeful attention to transitions that you're focusing on this afternoon is really critical to ensuring young children are successful in school and in life. And I know the expertise that you have on this webinar will give you key activities, lessons learned, challenges and opportunities that you can take back, whether you're at the state level or the district level or right in the classroom. Thank you again for letting us be part of this, and I hope you have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Stephen, very much. Our understanding is that Stephen won't have the opportunity to respond to questions this afternoon, but if you have questions that you'd like to be directed to the department folks and want to send those to us, we will try to include those in the set of questions that we provide responses to in terms of follow-up. We're next going to hear from Judith Gerald, who's a valued friend and colleague of mine, who is currently at an organization called Save the Children, but actually has gone through a number of transitions in her own leadership and work as a child advocate that allow her to speak, with a terrific experience to the topic this afternoon. She actually began her work in early childhood as the founder and director of Early Education Services, a very comprehensive, innovative, and very well-respected local program for young children and families in Windham County, Vermont, where she administered a wide range of early education programs, including Early Head Start, Preschool, Head Start, Even Start, state welfare reform and child care contracts, and school district preschool programs. That program was housed in the local school district, so she had experience working on the early childhood comprehensive array of services from within a school district. From there, she moved to Washington, D.C. in 1999 to be the first national coordinator of the Early Head Start program, where I got the opportunity to work with her and where she had opportunity to address issues of transitions for first-time parents as well as for parents moving from the Early Head Start infant toddler program into various preschool and child care programs and then onto the schools. Most recently, as you note in this slide, she's working at Save the Children, where she administers a new birth to 5 early childhood language and literacy program called Early Steps to School Success that is focused on rural, resource-poor communities throughout the United States and also serves as a model for Save the Children's work on a global scale in the early childhood sector. So looking forward to hearing Judy's comments. And again, if you want to start generating questions, you can do that by typing them in on your computer as you listen to Judy and watch the slides. So, Judy.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. And I am so delighted to be here. Thinking about talking to all of you all across the country is very exciting indeed. We know that young children and families experience transition in many different ways throughout a child's young life. From home to child care, they transition into preschool and then transition into kindergarten. And today we are going to focus on preschool and kindergarten transitions. These are important milestones, as Tom mentioned. They really are rites of passage, particularly when a child is going into kindergarten, even though that child may have been in child care or Head Start or other preschool programs. It is an important milestone, but it can also be stressful. We will look at transition as a 3-part experience: the child, the parents, and the teacher caregivers. Both those who are sending the child on and those who are receiving the child. It's a two-way street for sure, involving these 3 to 4 players. So we want to think about it as both a going to and a coming from experience. We know that moving from home to group care or from preschool to kindergarten can generate feelings of worry, fear, and stress. But fortunately, there's a lot that we can do to make a positive, smooth transition. So why are smooth transitions important? Well, I would like to suggest that for children, a thoughtful, planned transition means less stress and fear, more confidence, a positive outlook about where they are going, and a greater sense of trust, which is important. For parents, it builds parent trust in their child's ability to adjust and achieve in a new setting, gives them confidence in their own ability to let go. That is often quite difficult, and help their child adjust and achieve. Also, they see themselves as partners in their child's educational experience and can have a sense of pride and commitment to being involved in that. That's what we want to build. They can also learn skills in communicating and partnering with teaching professionals, because although I know you don't look at yourselves that way, sometimes teachers are frightening to parents. The sending teacher may be sharing some of the sense of loss and letting go if they have had this child in their school or in their child care setting for a while. So it's an opportunity for them to participate in this letting go as well and to support the parent and act as a bridge from one setting to another. The receiving teacher school is a very important player. That's the person who really begins the homeschool partnership, sets the stage for the next several years. Next slide, please. So what are some of the elements of school transition to school? Well, first of all, as you can see on this side, 3 times the word relationship is up there. It is all about relationship, folks. And I want to say also that it's very important to build the school-parent relationship before there are problems that need to be addressed, so that there is a trusting relationship if and when problems do arise. So what a better time to do it when the parents and the children first come into the school. We know that parent involvement depends upon how welcome a parent feels in the school. It's a very important part of it. We also know that family involvement in education boosts young children's academic scores. It can. Research shows that. Some other research shows that the strength of the relationship between a child and his or her kindergarten teacher can predict how well the child will adapt to school and learn, not just in kindergarten, but over the following years. And we know that children who transition well, who have good experiences in kindergarten, really are much better at accepting and becoming accustomed to school routines, to policies and practices as they move through the school system. And as far as friendships are as we think about that, we know they're a very important ingredient in a child's school experience, and that a teacher can play an important role in helping to make those social connections between children and between parents as well. Next slide, please. So what are some useful tools for, what are some transition strategies? Well, the first one I want to offer is plan ahead. Do not wait until the last minute. One of the things we used to say in Early Head Start is transition begins as soon as the child is enrolled. And I think that this is true that at least 6 months before a child is going to kindergarten, the sending teachers and the receiving teachers can begin to provide activities and materials that support transition. Things such as offering names of books or even giving books that have something to do with going to school, going to kindergarten, sending letters home, and holding parent group meetings. The more you can make these homeschool connections before school starts, the smoother it will be. Such as some other things. Next slide, please. Bringing parents together so that they can connect and share their concerns, ask questions, visit the classroom. Also connecting once the child is in school, making sure that the parent and the teacher connect perhaps 6 to 8 weeks into the school year. Because the parent's really wondering, okay, how is she really doing? And the teacher by this time may have some questions that they need. You know, why is Joey so clingy all of a sudden? Oh, maybe it's because we just had a new baby. You know, making sure that information is sharing back and forth. Also, at the very beginning, to offer parent volunteer opportunities. There's one activity that's one of my favorites, which is on the first day of school when most parents do bring their child. Even if they're working, they get to work a little late on that day because it is such a milestone. That once the child goes into the kindergarten classroom, if there are other parent volunteers or school staff who can ask those parents to join them for a short coffee clatch in which the parents can sort of talk with each other about what this has been like, how they're feeling about this, and also sign up sheets for volunteering. It's a good way to begin that as well. Next slide, please. It's also important for the sending and receiving schools to work together over time, not just around transition, but for the preschool teachers or the child care centers and the school personnel to build relationships that will support smooth transition. For example, they could share trainings during the year, get together to discuss the different curriculum materials, the expectations that a kindergarten teacher may have for what a child will know coming into kindergarten. And parent meetings can also be shared by the sending and receiving teachers and programs. Field trips to the school, creating orientation packets together perhaps, sending a letter home that is sent from both teachers, the child care teacher or the Head Start teacher and the kindergarten teacher. Making home visits together is another example. One thing, and this does requires some resources, but one thing that has proven to be successful is something that's called SCAMP, School Camp, where a kindergarten has a school district offers a kindergarten class for 1 week with the teacher, the kindergarten teacher, and with perhaps some preschool teachers who have worked with the children who are going to be attending. And in this way, the children get into the school before those older children who are running up and down the corridors get there. They get to know the school building, the bathrooms, the cafeteria, the library, and it's not so overwhelming. And what I've been told by teachers is that doing this 1 week program gives the child truly a head start in that the teachers are able to begin a lot of the work that they do sooner because the routines are already in place. And they felt that it gave a very good beginning to the fall. Next slide, please. We discussed group transition activities, but it's also important to incorporate individual opportunities for the teacher and parents to share information and to help the teacher get to know the child better. And one way to do that is through portfolios. It's something that we're doing in our Early Steps program. For 4 years, the parent and child works on a portfolio, and for the parent to be able to take such a book or books maybe to meet with the teacher, to share information, to say, this is my child, this is what my child can do, this is what my child needs. Also important for kindergarten teachers early in the year to have one-on-one meetings so that they can focus on individual needs and strengths. And again, I would strongly suggest that this happen before school starts and then again early into the fall semester. Next slide, please. What is transition like for parents and children? It's something that I hope teachers ask themselves and show some empathy about. Parents are indeed excited, and as Tom said, children are excited too, but they also may feel sad, the parents, and conflicted because their child is less dependent upon them, worried perhaps about whether the teacher in school will be good for their child. Will the teacher like my child? Will she do well? Will he make friends? All of those things are very important for teachers to recognize and be available to discuss if needed. It's also important that the school help the parents prepare the child for kindergarten. Talk or give information out to the parents, suggesting that the parent practice self-help skills with the child, zipping a coat, filling backpacks, washing hands, toilet habits. And this may sound strange, but to be sure that a child knows his name. Sometimes children have nicknames, and they don't recognize it. Formally, the teacher might know some things of that nature. Next slide, please. I want to briefly share some discussion prompts that I think can be helpful to teachers when they're meeting with parents. It can help both the parent and the teacher focus on their knowledge and hopes for the child. Next slide, and you will see some of these. And these are, I haven't come to you yet, but next slide. Are you there? Well, I will go on about it. Learning and growing in kindergarten is a very important discussion for children and teachers to have. And some of the questions that teachers can ask parents or have parents even do in a questionnaire include things like having the parent say, what I like most about my child is, and what I find most challenging about caring for my child is, or 3 hopes that I have for my child are. Could we have the next slide, please? Slide 14.
You're on that one.
Okay, I've lost connection. I can see that now, so I'll keep going. Okay, sorry. On child 15 now, just some others. This could also be in a questionnaire sort of situation in which, that both the teacher and the parent can be talking about, my child is happiest, or I notice, as the teacher could say, your child is happiest when she is in the block corner. I think my child needs help with, or I think your child needs help with, and so forth. Next slide, please, slide 16. But what I really like, the tool here that I really like has to do with setting goals together. That parents and teachers together sit down and say, what are our goals for the child now? What do we want her to be able to do in 3 months, in 6 months? And what are the kinds of things that you can do at home and that I can do in school as the teacher that will help make this child do that? How can we work together to best support the child? Now, wouldn't this practice be wonderful to continue throughout all the child's school years, right into adolescence, really working together on behalf of that child? Slide 17, please. I have devoted only one slide to challenges, and there's a reason for that, because I don't believe there really is any reason why positive, strong school transition and homeschool partnerships can't happen. Although there are challenges, I think that if we think about it in terms of a relationship that we need to build, that is absolutely crucial in the child's success in school, that it can be done. Time, of course, is an issue. Parents are working, and school personnel need to be aware of that and be supportive of what they can do to meet with parents when parents can meet. We know that resources are shrinking in school budgets, and that some of the things I suggested may not be possible. And also, it sometimes is a challenge in rural areas to make the kinds of homeschool connections that we need to make. It is a challenge if the family does not speak English, if the home language is not spoken in the school. There are challenges when there are special needs and migrant populations, but it really comes down to knowing and accepting as a community that this is an important thing to do, to support positive homeschool relationships that begin with transitions in school. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Judy. We're getting a number of questions, and we want to make sure that we get a chance to direct some of those to Judy before we go on to our next presenter. And I guess one that I think is increasingly of interest to schools and early childhood programs that ties into your focus on the importance of relationships is how advice you would provide in terms of the challenges of transitions, working successfully to promote good transitions for parents with limited English proficiency, the increasing number of communities that are having families from immigrant backgrounds and refugees that are coming into early childhood programs and then moving into schools. So we'd love to hear any response you have on that.
Sure. It's a very good question. It's very important because it is a challenge, and very often many of these families are moving into rural areas or communities where there are not speakers of that language. So it is very important to address and to look at. I think another part of that is that culturally, very often, some families coming from other countries have not had an experience of being involved in the school in a partnering way in which we expect in the United States. So I think the first step is to really try to help bring that parent in as a partner and help them, or parents, help them understand that they are welcome, that they are needed. How do you do that? Well, of course, it's very important that somebody speaks their language. And there are often community folks who can come to a parent-teacher meeting and help with that, or a family relative who does speak English who can be included. I think that the approach that the teacher makes, the acceptance and the respect for that family's culture as well as language, by demonstrating things in the classroom, by sharing cultural things, are very important.
Thanks very much. Another question that came in from a participant has to do with, while affirming the importance of relationships, again, asking about the issue of whether there are ways to use technology to increase the opportunities to communicate with parents, between parents and schools, sharing plans, sharing data. And I've been in a number of meetings with programs recently that have been saying that younger parents of young children are extremely tech savvy they're used to kind of living on their cell phones. So I wonder if you either have experiences or ideas about ways in which the importance of in-person relationships and communication can be complemented with use of technology.
Absolutely, and in fact, it was part of my presentation, but I had to cut it short. I had too much. I could talk about this forever. The texting, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things we're finding in our home visiting program is you want to contact a parent to see if they're going to be home for the home visit, text them. Don't call them, don't email them, text them. Don't send a letter, text them. That seems to be very good. But another thing that many teachers and schools are doing is that they have sites set up so that they can, a parent can go on and see what the curriculum is for the next week, what the lunch menu is for the next week. They can be asking questions, could you please have your child bring such and such into school because we're going to be studying X. All of those kinds of emailing and going online to communicate, I think, are very important and very doable, because what we find, anyway, is that most parents do have access to a computer somehow.
Great. We're doing great. Another question that has come in has to do with, at kind of a program level, how different early care and education programs can share assessment information that they may have collected on children. Another dimension of this would be for the many children who may be involved in special education in their early childhood years and are going to be going into school, and how to address the transition there. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question, sharing assessment data and the transition for families who have young children with disabilities.
Yes. In terms of the assessment data, it certainly is necessary that information gets shared. And I think that the relationship between the sending program, the parents, and the receiving program is how that should be shared. It should be shared in a meeting. The portfolio that I mentioned is a way to do that so that the teacher can really get a picture of the child over time. I think it can also be shared by teacher-to-teacher meetings, that a sending teacher can share information one-on-one with a teacher. When that happens, I think, depends on the individual. Sometimes teachers don't want that information until they get to see the child for a few weeks themselves, because they don't want to color their own, opportunity of learning to know that child. In terms of disabilities, I think we're better set up in the schools to be doing that, because the services that the child has often been receiving often comes through the school districts. And so those teachers already have a relationship, they know each other, they can get together more easily. But if the child is coming from someplace else, and also in order to include the parent and the other people who work on the individual plans for these children, they need to get together in a meeting so they all know who's doing what.
Terrific ideas. We've got time for about one more question, and I'm thinking that it might be worth asking you to offer some reflections on your experience in working in very rural communities in the United States, and both the strengths and possible challenges of connecting early childhood partners, families, and schools at this transition point.
Thank you. As you know, 1 in 5 of our rural children are even more, in some places much higher, are living in poverty. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Save the Children is go into these communities that are very poor and really make the connections to the schools. So we are in the schools, and this is one of the things that I would suggest if any rural school can do this, is to have somebody, be it doesn't have to be school personnel, it can be somebody else in the community, but somebody who connects these young children and families with the school at a very early age, sort of like a family resource center, because if you can get those children and families connected when they're babies, it's a much more positive situation. Transportation is a huge issue. In rural communities, it's very hard to get parents to the schools, so that's one reason that home visiting also works. I would say that both one of the challenges and also one of the beauties of working in small rural communities is that everybody knows everybody else. It's a challenge because they know all the bad things those parents did when they were in school. They've got an opinion about that family, and it's a good thing because they're connected and they know each other and they want to help each other. I could go on forever, Tom, but I know you don't want me to.
Thanks a lot. That's
okay.
Wonderful, and we appreciate this great kickoff following Stephen, and we're now going to turn to our third presenter, Dr. Sharon Ritchie. Sharon is a senior scientist at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and currently is the co-director of a really innovative and exciting program called Preschool, which is working currently in North Carolina and Michigan, I believe soon to possibly expand to some other states. And it's basically an effort to rethink education for children ages 3 through 3rd grade with a particular focus on African American, Latino, and low-income students. Prior to beginning her work at Preschool, she was on the faculty at UCLA where she co-directed 3 major research projects that examined early childhood and early school practices. She also worked as a teacher educator at UCLA. She's been involved in a number of other national initiatives, including creating materials for NAUAC accreditation and doing studies of accreditation, and her original background is as a special educator. So we're excited to have the opportunity to hear next from Dr. Sharon Ritchie, and I'll turn it over to her.
Good afternoon. All right. So we, too, are interested that the pathways be smoothed across the traditional transition points and believe that the big picture alignment and integration of curriculum, programs, and practices that will ultimately make these important transitions seamless. So we are a pre-K through 3rd grade initiative. And I think the important words are pre-K through 3rd, because we really believe that uniting the best of early childhood, elementary, and special education is key to making the experiences of young children as vital as they should be. We all have so much to learn from one another, and if we take what we know is the best, I think it's in the best interest of young children. We believe that public school word is very important as well. We're not saying that we want to have a special private school program. We're saying that we have to work in the real world where real kids are, and that we take our work seriously in the public sector. And we really do want to focus on those who have been traditionally underserved by our schools, and we really work in our poorest schools with our high minority population. So why pre-K-3 education? The children are already in school, so how do we maximize the fact that we have many of our kids in school by ages 3 and 4? Sadly, we know that a lot of children are not doing well, and that retention is both expensive and ineffective. And then we get these fade-out arguments with some notion that if you just, if pre-K is really as good as it should be, well, then why aren't kids still achieving by the time they're in 4th and 5th grade? To me, that's sort of like saying, well, you've had breakfast already, so why on earth would we want to have lunch and dinner as well? And it's just like, let's give them that very solid start that they need in order to make sure that they're really ready by the time they leave 3rd grade. So where did our work come from? We did studies in the early 2000s across 11 states, looking at hundreds and hundreds of classrooms. And although the results were not positive, it surely did give us the picture of what it was we wanted to work on. And certainly the things that Judith was talking about the alignment between pre-K and elementary is like, what is it that we do to take the greatest advantage of the fact that we have young children, and how do we smooth that move for them into elementary? How do we improve that communication between teachers across that span as well? We saw that there were low ratings on classroom quality, and sadly what we continue to know, that our poorest children are in the lowest quality classrooms. And we really also wanted to spend time looking at how to improve the school experiences of children, that they have more meaningful interactions, that they have less time in transitions and routines. So part of the way that we work with schools is that we really do use data not to evaluate schools, but rather to help them inquire into practice. We're not in the business of saying that you're doing this right, wrong, or indifferently, but rather offering schools, individual teachers, and grade levels some things to think about, views of their practice that they don't normally get. We're going to be looking at that in a second. Also to help them develop the structures that support the kind of work that Judith is describing, and even more. So how do we really have those things in place to make sure that we're communicating and that there is continuity? And finally, how do we get kids off to a really good start by rethinking what's important to have them be ready to do? In front of you, you have some data that we gather on every single teacher in pre-K through third grade classrooms in the schools where we work. And as I said, we don't use it to evaluate them, but rather sit down with them as individuals and as grade levels to have them look at their data and become curious about this. So you have in front of you two things. One, we're going to look at their experiences of children as they move from pre-K and K, and also look at some of the differences between what teachers believe about what's good for children and, in essence, what really happens for them. These graphs read like a clock, so you're going to be looking at what's called basics, which are for us transitions, and then down to meals and snacks, full group, etc. Just since we're looking at transitions from pre-K to K, and we're thinking about, this is on the backs of 5- and 6-year-old children, that they're experiencing, if you look at the gray triangle and the black large space on the pre-K and the large gray space and small black space on the kindergarten, you see that whole group and choice time is basically flipped. These numbers are percentages of time. If you want sort of the minutes of time, just multiply times 4. But you can see that there's a dramatic difference in what children experience and how much time is given to thinking about what that means for children to move from 19% of their day to 32% of their day in whole group time, that their opportunity for choice drops from 36% of their day to 12% of the day. And how do teachers talk to each other about making that transition smoother and about what it is philosophically that makes you make those decisions? If you go to the bottom graph, which is corresponding to the one on your right, we're looking at when we talk to the kindergarten teachers about what they believed was good, was a way how kids should spend their day versus what was happening. You see, particularly in the bottom 3 triangles on the kindergarten beliefs, that they believe that children should have a very balanced experience. But in fact, when we go in their classrooms, that's not what's happening. So what are the conversations that you have in order to help them think about why that's true? Here we were particularly looking at the experiences of minority boys and how groupings were affecting them, and really saw that for these teachers that their minority boys were far more attentive in the small group settings than in the individual and whole group settings. And of course, that's not just such an easy thing to say, because small group, to have success in small group, you have to make sure that kids are autonomous, that kids can be independent, that kids can function as community members, so that there's all of those things that have to be in place in order for kids to be able to benefit from small group instruction. Here we were looking at the content and the things that children were engaged in, and in this particular teacher's classroom, these children have opportunities to do lots and lots of different things. They have access to a wide variety of literacy. They get to have math and science. They're moving around a lot. In other teachers' classrooms, we see far less in the way of a balance of children's experiences, that they may have. They may not be read to at all. They may have only phonics instruction, that they might not get around to science. And so how do we talk to teachers about how we help them have more of those experiences? We also need to collaborate for continuity. And this means, of course, that communication is essential to the seamless education. So Ready Schools are importantly getting schools ready for children instead of children ready for schools. And that takes a real different kind of a mindset. And it also takes a willingness to really look at your school and do self-assessment and be critical about many aspects of your school, to develop groups of people to look at schools that cover that pre-K through third grade span, and to really focus on the importance of leadership, not just at the administrative level, but also developing leaders within the teachers. There's also the development of professional learning communities, and that is really more of the use of school data and the development of reflective practitioners at both vertical teams and horizontal, that you look across the pre-K-3 span, as well as really paying attention to what's happening in each of the classrooms at a particular grade level. And finally, truly family engagement teams who are creating multiple and varied opportunities for communication between teachers and families, to have schools demonstrate a genuine interest in the children and their families, and finally to collect data through a variety of methods. And we do focus groups where we really talk with parents about their real interest in their children and what those relationships should look like. Rethinking foundational processes. Judith talked a lot about relationship. I couldn't agree more. I think that relationships are essential, and we truly do know that it's a positive relationship between a child and the teacher is central to optimal learning. The teacher regulation is too often replacing self-regulation, and that it's essential to kids doing well, that they learn to delay gratification and reduce impulsivity, but this takes real attention. It's not going to happen by itself. And then finally, to make sure that children have a lot of opportunities to represent their learning. Prescribed curriculum has cut out a lot of the opportunities for teachers to hear from children verbally, to see graphically and pictorially how and what they're learning. So really to be able to open up those opportunities, because if the children are ready for school, then those transitions are going to be smoother for them. So that was a very quick view of First School, and I'll turn it back to Tom.
Thanks very much, Sharon. It's really terrific to be able to hear about the ideas that underlie your initiative. And actually, one of the first questions that we've received has to do more with helping people understand the scope of your activity, where you're now working, and are you available to provide help to other schools that are interested in these ideas?
Well, so we do work on 3 different levels. Our major and most intense work is to work with 4 schools in North Carolina and 4 in Michigan where we're in multi-year projects to really help schools look at this data, develop the collaborative structures, et cetera. But we also work at a state level at both North Carolina and Michigan. Particularly in North Carolina, we're working with their demonstration pre-K and K sites, and also working to the Ready Schools movement that is very important in North Carolina, so that we're trying to highlight some of the things that we do in the intensive consultation. And then nationally, we're working on developing institutes so that people can come in, and we're not ready to do these yet, but these are certainly on the agenda, to look at First School as a large overview, but also to come in and really focus on different aspects, focus on instructional practice, focus on the effective use of data, focus on homeschool partnerships. And so sort of two different directions, one a more general one and one a more specific one. So we're hoping to have literature out on that in the near future.
Wonderful. Another question that people are posed has to do with whether you're dealing with issues of health and wellness at First School as a problem area, or as an area where you're finding you can promote more responsiveness to family needs.
Well, I'm going to answer. I'm not sure that I'm going to answer that as directly as you ask it, but we'll see. I think the things that we feel that we're good at focusing on is the importance of nutrition and exercise and fresh air. We're seeing so much of, with all of the pressure and the testing, that the first thing that seems to go is recess time and gym time and time to really move around. And so we're really trying to help schools recognize that it's that movement and nutrition and fresh air that actually helps kids learn, and that it's not to shorten up their meals and snacks and to not give them that opportunity is, in the long run, detrimental to kids. I think also in our homeschool partnerships that part of making those successful is really helping schools identify community resources. And so, identifying ways that they can have medical homes and to have proper dental care, and how schools can facilitate that and have the resources on hand is an area that we're working on, and I would not say that we've made huge headway. And again, with all of the budget cuts, school nurses are non-existent. Social workers are harder to come by, and they're trying to deal with 5 and 6 schools. So it's a very troubling situation.
Thanks. Very good response. Well, another question. I think people are, and I'm impressed with the approach that you're taking to using various kinds of data in kind of a diagnostic, professional development approach, rather than, as you said, to evaluate individuals. I think at the same time there's a question about how you're approaching the evaluation of this initiative in terms of what kinds of outcomes you're looking for and looking at, and as well, are you seeing some promising outcomes in terms of progress based on the schools that you've been working with the longest?
Okay, so we're just not quite a year in, but yes, of course we want to. We do have a whole other set of data that looks at us, that we don't share with the teachers. But one of our data sources is the class, Bob Pianta and Karen Laparo's measure out of the University of Virginia, that really will let us know, what effect we're having on emotional climate and on instructional approaches and on classroom organization. We're also particularly interested in seeing, we're looking at attendance, at discipline, at retention. Are those things, is attendance improved? Is retention lessened? Are there, are parents participating in greater numbers? Are there more opportunities for parents? So those are some of the kinds of things that we're looking at. Our professional learning communities more prevalent? We're doing a lot of, we do a lot of quantitative data, but we do a lot of qualitative as well. And so what is the quality of those meetings? And we're looking at how the school develops as a learning community, not just at the grade level, but how it begins to function as a community. And I think, becoming a reflective practitioner and becoming curious about children and being willing to inquire into what's happening and take a great interest, I think, are sort of the very large goals for us.
Terrific. Just maybe we have time for one last question, and I asked Judith to talk about the special issues in rural communities. I know from past conversations with you that one of the things you've been looking at as a particular priority in schools that you've been working with is the issue of African American males and their early school experience. And I wonder if you just share a few thoughts about what you're seeing there in terms of what needs to happen to be more responsive to what those youngsters need. We know that their achievement is a problem in the later school years. So how are you looking at that?
Well, I think one of the main things that we think about are improving the school experiences for children. And so what does that really mean? And so often it's our African American boys who are in trouble all the time. And one of the things we've really started to talk to teachers about are their arbitrary rules, sort of the crisscross applesauce, the walking with your hands behind your back, the silent lunches, and who is overrepresented in terms of getting in trouble for those kinds of things. And really start talking to teachers about what the function of their rules are, and to even pay, sometimes you just do things out of habit and aren't really thinking about it. And teachers have started to give a great deal of, have really paid attention to who's getting in trouble and how useful is it to take away recess to make sure that they don't get the ice cream party. And so teachers want to have their children have good experiences. And I think, just bringing that up and offering awareness has really changed the conversation. I think another thing that we've talked about is how oftentimes that the African American boys are so easily hurt by things like not getting to be first or feeling that something unjust has happened to them. And really recognizing that, of course, they can't solve that problem, that children cannot be first every time, but rather really noticing for how long children shut down and are absent from learning, that they become sullen and angry and are going home with those feelings and not eager to come back. And so how do you go back and how do you really develop the relationship, make sure that you validate the feelings, that you make sure a child has a turn the next day, and that development of that relationship. So those, there's a lot of things to talk about, but those are two of the things that we talk about with teachers quite a lot.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for all that you've shared with us this afternoon. And for folks who put in questions that we weren't able to get to, we are going to try to respond to a select group of those in the follow-up to the webinar. Our final presentation this afternoon is going to be from Whitcomb Hayslip, who is a former assistant superintendent at the Los Angeles Unified School District, where he worked for many years and was in that role responsible for programs serving over 35,000 young children between birth and 5 years of age. He's currently working as a consultant on a variety of projects, including the state-level transitional kindergarten initiative that he's going to talk about a little bit with us, as well as in California, as well as Educare in Los Angeles. He's done graduate training in both child development and special education, and began his career as a teacher of infants and toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergarten-age children. We're looking forward to his comments and then to taking your questions for him. So I'll turn it over to Whit.
Thanks, Tom. First of all, I want to talk about the fact that I'm going to be dealing with a specific model that we're using here in Los Angeles, And I'm very clear about the fact that LA is a unique community, and so that as I'm talking about this, it's not that I'm saying that you're going to necessarily replicate exactly what we're doing here in LA, but I hope that there are some lessons that we've learned through this that may be applicable both in urban and rural communities throughout the country. And that I'm going to be talking about a program we're calling Transition Kindergarten, and really trying to put it in the context of the whole continuum from actually birth through third grade. That first of all, I want to sort of talk about the genesis of this program. That first of all, California is one of only 4 states with a required kindergarten admission date as late as December. And most of you around the country do not have that date in December. We're only one of 4 states that have it. Most have moved it up to August, September, and there's either a couple of states that have moved it as early as June. And so that at the same time, we know that we have very rigorous kindergarten standards in California. If you compare our standards with other states, you'll see that we're talking about very rigorous standards for our youngest children in our K-12 system. And then finally, and that this came about as a study that we had done by Dr. Linda Espinosa and Dr. Marlene Zepeda, who were looking at particularly at our dual language learners, our LA Unified School District. And as they looked at those dual language learners, they discovered that that what was happening was that if we looked at our children as they moved through our system, that our kindergarten-age children looked quite good, that we had children who were exiting kindergarten looking quite good in terms of our curricular-based assessments. But when we looked at our Grade 2 California Standards Test, our English language arts scores raised great concern. And so actually the same cohort of children that looked positive and progressing at the end of kindergarten did not look good at the end of second grade. So all of this came together for us to really evaluate that what was going on. One of the things we considered was, why did this one cohort of children look positive at the end of kindergarten but not at the end of second grade? We started evaluating what was the content of our kindergarten program, our first grade program, our second grade program. We realized that our kindergarten program was actually very, very heavily directed toward decoding, whereas in the second grade program that there was much more emphasis on meaning and comprehension, and began to feel that we had a group of children who were moving through our system that really had not had the foundation in what we want to call language development and concept development. That how we responded, we looked at this, and so our superintendent and our chief academic officer proposed a new transition kindergarten program for the youngest kindergartners. So what we did was to look at a few other districts in California who had acknowledged the fact that we were putting very, very young children into a very academically rigorous program, and had piloted the use of a new program for the youngest kindergartners. So our superintendent and chief academic officer thought this was one way that we could begin to address this transition issue. That we got some support from both the Packard Foundation and the Boeing Corporation to provide funding for the development of the program. We were extremely fortunate to have Dr. Linda Espinosa from the University of Missouri be named as the chief consultant in that program development, and she's played a very key role along with us this first year in our implementation. We were also very fortunate that our Title I committee here in the district allocated a substantial amount of money to help support the initial program implementation and professional development. I know that it's very clear in Title I guidelines about the use of Title I money around early childhood. Unfortunately, if you look at what's going around the country, many districts do not. So we were extremely fortunate that our Title I committee looked at this issue and saw the importance of it. So what happened was, last fall we implemented this program with 36 schools, and that we're going to be adding an additional 80 schools in the fall of 2001. And then what happened right at the end of the calendar year was that the legislature in California voted to change the kindergarten age and actually to implement this transitional kindergarten program for our youngest kindergartners statewide. Okay, that the goal of this program is to provide our youngest kindergartners with a readiness year that's developmentally appropriate and better prepare them for success once they enter kindergarten. That I also want to talk about the importance of this program in terms of transition for all children. That has to do with the fact that we have a quite effective set of what we call our early learning foundations for birth to 5 in California. Some states call those standards. We call them early learning foundations. But all of our programs in California are publicly funded programs, including Head Start, adhere to those early learning foundations. We also have a very clear and designated set of California kindergarten standards. What we have discovered is that continuum from our early learning foundations to our kindergarten standards is not clearly implemented and also understood by both parents and teachers. So one of the goals of this program was to really be able to say, how are we helping teachers, how are we helping parents understand the connection on that continuum from our early learning foundations to our kindergarten standards. Our statewide Early Learning Council has now decided, and with our state school board, that we're actually going to designate this and come up with some clearer guidelines so that we can show that continuum for all of the programs in the state. Also, when we started to design this program with Dr. Espinosa, we looked at what we're calling traditional kindergarten. This is the kindergarten program we've been running. And as I stated earlier, we looked at our curriculum, and it had a very heavy emphasis on decoding. And that while we looked at language and communication and social emotional development in our kindergarten program, we clearly saw that the focus was on decoding. In this transition kindergarten program, as we're trying to give children stronger foundations, we really flipped that so that we really are saying the focus of transition kindergarten is language communication and social emotional development with decoding. So we're not saying there's not decoding in transition kindergarten, but the emphasis has been flipped between the two programs. Also, that we have felt that the very important element in all of this has been engaging families, both in terms of understanding development, but actually understanding what is a brand new grade in California, and helping families understand that this is not holding children back or putting children back or remedial in any way, but is really foundational along a continuum of development. So one of the things, we have a hugely diverse population in Los Angeles, and actually primarily Latino, so that we have more than 80% of our kindergarten children are Latino, and more than 65% are dual language learners. So one of the tools that we have used is both traditional and ethnic media. We have had great cooperation from both the Los Angeles Times, Univision, and Telemundo, and they were very interested in a new program and were anxious to get positive stories. There are so many negative stories about education. So we've had great success in both print and video media in terms of talking about the program. We also talked about personalized contacts from both teachers and administrators at transition kindergarten sites. I want to stress the personalized contacts. Many of our schools have been doing what we call kindergarten roundup, or meetings where we brought together teachers and parents together. The schools that have been most successful are ones that follow that up with actual individual meetings with families. So they begin to lay that foundation for collaboration and work. The principals who do it say it's hard work to try to find that time to meet with each of those families, but we see a real difference when that happens. Also, some of the schools have designated what we call parent ambassadors. So these are kindergarten, first grade parents who actually work with the incoming families to help them understand what they're going to be benefiting from, what's coming in, and how the whole system works. Next, we also realize that the teaming with the preschool staff members to bridge this, so that we need to educate and talk a lot about transition kindergarten with preschool teachers. They need to know about the content, the curriculum, what's happening in it, because they have the relationships with those families. And so that we see that the more we work with them, the better off families are in connecting. Kindergarten teachers and preschool teachers need to know more about their curriculum and what's happening there. I will tell you honestly, this works best when we have co-located programs where we actually have preschool programs on the site, and that's the case in many of our schools in Los Angeles. And then finally is the use of family members as experts, informants, and program planning. So that one of the things we have learned with Dr. Espinosa's help is it is not just about telling a parent about the program, but it is learning from the parent about their child. And so one of the things Dr. Espinosa has designed for us is a parent interview and languages interest survey that we do with families. We sit down with families and we talk about what's going on, what languages are used in the home, what their concerns are for their child. It's different than what we normally do in terms of language testing. This is to find out what's going on in the household, what the family prefers, what they want, and how the child has been exposed in terms of their early experiences. Now, here's some activities, some specific activities we've used in our program. First of all is the one I just referred to, which is a family languages and interest interview. This is a time where teachers sit down with families and actually talk about the development of language, talk about culture, and talk about the family's values and what they want for their child. The next thing we've been using is a wonderful program called Abriendo Puertas, or Opening Doors. This is a comprehensive parent leadership and advocacy training program, evidence-based, and it is distributed nationally through a group called Families in Schools. This is really addressing the sort of unique needs that some of our families have, and as I said in LA Unified, the majority of our families in terms of coming from the Latino culture. Next, we have a wonderful program called Me Gusta Leer, and I Like to Read, which is a home lending library program, backpacks that we funded from the Boeing Corporation, go back and forth with books in both English and Spanish, helping families understand that their reading to their child in their home language is helping their child academically. In the past, we've done a lot of sort of sending books home in English to Spanish-speaking families. And so this is a program that really acknowledges what the new brain research is showing us about the benefits of dual language acquisition. We also have been working with a wonderful group in Palo Alto, California called Bring Me a Book Foundation, and they've been doing workshops with our families as parents, as first teachers, which is really talking a lot about dialogical reading and not just sending books home, but really giving parents some guidelines about the benefits that they can gain from the use of those books. We also are doing family activity nights. One of the things that when we met with the 36 school principals and teachers before we started the program, they said, we're tired of the old stale parent education meetings and activities. So we've taken a much more hands-on activity-based approach. So we're doing activity nights where children and families come together. We've focused this year on literacy and mathematics activities where families come and do those together with all of the siblings and all of the children. The next, which goes along with that, is what we call Road to College Family Field Trips. This came as a direct request from principals and teachers. So what we are doing on Saturdays, and this again is with some support from the Boeing Corporation, we're taking the whole family to colleges and universities. And we sort of have a dual purpose here. A majority of our families have not experienced higher education, so we're opening the door to that, exposing them to that. And that what's interesting to us is that the colleges and universities have been very open to this and are actually planning activities for the children. So it's not the children going and just trailing along with their families, but some of the child development programs at the universities are working to make this a fun experience for both the adults and the children. As was mentioned earlier, that we're having a lot of volunteer opportunities, and this is for both families who can come into the classroom, but also for families who may not be able to, and so helping us with preparation of materials, calling, whatever they can do, but including them in it. And then finally, use of newsletters and Connect Ed communication systems, so that we have a technology system that can have where our teachers can send multiple messages to all of their families through the telephone, and then that families can come back and leave a message for the teacher through that system. Okay, next steps that we have, we've only just begun. As I said, we did 36 classrooms this year. Over the next 3 years, we have to grow to 600 of those classrooms. We will be serving between 12 and 13,000 children in this program within 3 years. So we're also trying to share the lessons learned from the development of this program along the whole P3 continuum. Many of the strategies we talk about for children and families are not unique to transition kindergarten. So we've been trying to do more of our professional development along the P3 continuum. One of the most exciting things that has happened about this is that how we've really created new lines of communication. It was sometimes when you focus on something new, it leads you into new areas. So that what happened at these schools was when we created this brand new grade level, which was called transition kindergarten, the teachers weren't quite sure whether they should be meeting with the preschool teachers or whether they should be meeting with the kindergarten teachers. So what it really did was force a bridge there, and so now all of our schools that are involved, we actually see meetings going on with the preschool, with the kindergarten, with the transition kindergarten, with the transition kindergarten teacher being a link for that. Another thing we're doing is to really look at the use of data. That we're doing some assessment within our transition kindergarten program that we're entering into the school data system, and we're talking about how that's going to be transitioning on to kindergarten and first grade, and how we use that and inform instruction from it. One of the things that has always concerned me is that we have nearly 40,000 children in our early childhood programs, And many times our kindergarten classes start as if every child was coming in at the same place. So the more we can do to individualize and personalize by moving children from where they are and helping the data do that to inform teachers as children move on. That the next thing we're doing, and that's exploring some alternative administrative structures, that we actually see that in terms of the way we've set up in the past with very distinct administration for our preschool programs, distinct administration for our K-12 programs, and to begin to see if there's some new structures that not only can bring teachers together, but really can bring schools together along that P3 continuum. And then finally, one of the things that we are beginning to see is that as we get more information about the importance of early childhood, our principals and our teachers are saying 3 is pretty late. And so that we're beginning to look at opportunities where that community support that children birth to 3 can begin to connect to each of those elementary schools. And we really believe that transition kindergarten was another sort of leverage point that inspired people to do that. So I know I went over, but that's what we're doing here, and I really look forward to learning together, and we're happy to share information as we gain it.
Fantastic. We really appreciate your enthusiasm, and it comes through. One of the things that interested me, and we got several questions on through the web system, is the range of things that you're doing in terms of family engagement. We counted 8 different projects that you were talking about, and I wonder if you have any initial feedback on which of those are proving to be most effective in terms of what you're hearing from teachers or parents themselves.
Yeah, and one of the things I did not say, and I think it's really important, and that is that with our Title I money, we also have a family engagement specialist. And so that we are acknowledging that people need help and coaching with it. So you're right, we have 8 programs, and so we kind of throw them out to the schools, and so how they're going to be facilitated and implemented, we really could not do it without this family engagement support that we're getting through Title I. I will tell you that I've become a true believer in Abriendo Puertas. It's evidence-based, it's gone through a lot of work, and it is such an interesting process in terms of what happens between teachers and families in it. And so I think that our teachers and our facilitators have been as changed by that program as our families have. It's based on using some what are called dichos, which are like sort of proverbs or sayings within Latino culture, and then it really begins to build from those. So it's saying, here's what's familiar and valuable and valued in a culture, and how do we all learn from it? So our teachers who are involved in that have been learning from those proverbs and have been learning from parents as they reflect on it. And what is really wonderful about that program as well is it's not just about parent education, it's about advocacy. And I mean that in a positive way. So it's really helping families understand their role in their child's education through, with their system as they move on. I also want to talk about the Bring Me a Book and the Me Gusta Leer. I think one of the things, and there are many programs about sending books home to families, but that one of the things I think is missing in many of them is understanding the relationship piece of reading. And I talk to people about when they were read to as a child, and they were probably in someone's lap or someone was sitting next to their bed. And so I think helping families understand that interactive language, the oral language piece that goes back and forth. So what I like about both of these programs are not just sending books home, but they're giving parents support and guidance in the use of books in the home.
Wonderful. Maybe one other issue that you could embellish on a little bit or expand on a little bit was what you mentioned about your efforts to try to look at how you can share data between the different early childhood programs that are sending kids to kindergarten and transitional kindergarten, and then also promoting better use of data by teachers in terms of planning instruction and seeing this continuum from early childhood through grade 3, as you mentioned.
Right, and this has been a process. I'll tell you what we did first, Tom, and obviously it is easier with the 36,000 preschoolers that are in our own program. I mean, when you're dealing with one system, it becomes much easier. But what happened first was we had to kind of develop a data system within our preschool programs. We didn't have one. And so that we started to work on that in connection with the people who did the K-12 data system. And so that we now have, in California, we use an ongoing assessment system called Desired Results. So all of our preschool programs are entering their desired results data into that system, and they can use it for ongoing information in terms of their reports that are produced by that, and then they can use that for their instructional programs, but also now, and this is only in the last year, that moves on to the kindergarten, first grade program, whether it be at their same site or not, so that the principal, the teachers at the receiving school can see where the child is on that continuum with the desired results. So as I said, we've actually moved a long way with our internal programs. We're currently working with our other publicly funded programs on memorandum of understandings around so that we can do some shared research, some shared data with them, because that's the big step. I mean, we have a very large Head Start program within our district, but the majority of our Head Start programs are outside the district. So we're working on ways that we can begin to transition that information as well. And also we have a First Five, which is a publicly funded early childhood system in California, and we're currently actually about to finalize a memorandum of understanding with them so that data would be shared from all of the children.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for all of this material, and it's a lot to absorb for people who may be hearing it for the first time, but I encourage folks to follow up with the contact information that's been included on the slides if you have questions. At this point, I hope Mariana is there, and I can turn it back to her, and certainly want to thank Stephen, Judith, Sharon, and Whit for a really full program, and for all of you who participated.
Thank you so much. On the screen right now, folks, you've got the evaluation coming up. We'd really appreciate if you could fill that out, help us make our webinars better going forward. We appreciate everybody bearing with our web server issues and audio issues as they came. We hope that you still come back next time. And we thank you so much to both our presenters and participants for taking the time to be with us today.
And Mariana, one question that I saw at an earlier point was people who were asking about the availability of the PowerPoints. Can you respond to that before we sign off?
Absolutely. Within a couple days, we'll be sending out the archived webinar link, which is the audio and presentation together. You'll also be getting the PowerPoint deck, and you will be getting a compilation of the Q&A that we weren't able to address during the webinar today.
Terrific. Okay, well, certainly thanks to the sponsors who have put this together, and we hope that you found it to be profitable and that you will continue work on this agenda in your local communities and states. Thanks very much, and hopefully there'll be further dialogue on this in subsequent webinars. Take care.
And thanks to you, Tom.
Sure.